they throw deep to an open receiver. Inside the 10, Ja'Cory Brooks. Down to the pylon. Touchdown, Alabama.
I just don't understand. If you don't make it to the playoff, how is it meaningless?
You are listening to The Review on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Review. It's the Online Sports Guys College Football Podcast featuring us, the Online Sports Guys. Don't have a full house today, but we are pretty close. OSG J-Dub back after a hiatus from a couple weeks. OSG Nelson, Brother Marty, myself, OSG Phil. A little later in the show, we'll be joined by Brother Wilkie in Wilkie's World, where he's going to talk about what's on his mind. Nah. I saw John shaking his head for those of you watching at home, so I had to do that, even though it's a really bad sound effect.
Phenomena.
You got him off the rails this time, J-Dub. It wasn't.
He started it. I'm just saying.
Guys, well, we're at that point of the season where we know who our college football championship game teams are going to be after a week of college bowl game mania. And so what do you think? Another year of Georgia versus Alabama.
Yawn.
Did you get to watch either of the games? I didn't get to watch too much of Alabama and Cincinnati, but I did get to watch a good bit of the Georgia game. It looked like Alabama did what Alabama did when it came to that Cincinnati game.
Young over the middle. Touchdown, Alabama.
They put
Brian
the ball
Roberts
down
had
up
a
front.
huge game, 240 yards on the ground. And Cincinnati really couldn't do much with the Bama defense.
I think Cincinnati did as best as they could do, or best as anyone could do against an Alabama team right now. I mean, it's just a buzzsaw. I mean, Luke Fickell had a good game plan. It just wasn't successful. And, because I did watch the majority of the Alabama game, and because I wanted to see what Cincinnati could do. But, yeah, they did as well as I think they could have done, considering.
They definitely did better than a Big 12 team would have done.
Yeah.
But to be honest, everybody gets buzzsawed by them in the first round, except for Ohio State and Sugar Bowl. But they, that margin, they got their butts handed to them, but that margin was a lot smaller than some of the more recent ones. And, a couple passes that don't get batted down at the front, that's a different ball game.
John, did you get to see any of it?
Oh, yeah, I did. No, I subjected myself to both games. Of course I did. And it was just in the Alabama-Cincinnati game, I know that pretty much 90% of the country was voting for Cincinnati here to try to do something. But honestly, right now, what you're seeing with Alabama is a team that is incredibly stout defensively, and their running game comes at you in waves, and you've got a quarterback who, even without John Mechie, has plenty of targets. And so when you have the balance that you have offensively, and you can just pretty much choke the game out defensively, and you cannot trade 7s for 3s in this situation if you're playing this current Alabama team. And Cincinnati was forced to do that early. They didn't, and they weren't able to catch up. In the other game, you look at what we saw with Georgia, and Pierce County represent one more time with Stetson Bennett version 4.0. Depending on your service, he was either a no-star or a 2-star. And what you saw from Stetson Bennett was what we had seen from Stetson Bennett dating back to his time at Pierce County, where he was a prolific passer, and his game has continued to grow in his college years, where some of the passes that he threw in that game were on absolute target.
Backpedals, scrambles, heaves downfield. It's caught. Jermaine Burton scores.
And it was fun to watch Stetson Bennett in that environment take care of Michigan. And it honestly looked like Jamari Salyer took it personal having Aiden McPherson in front of him. And, you look at this particular square off, And it was all Jamari Salyer. Aiden was nowhere to be found, getting no pressure on Stetson Bennett whatsoever off of Stetson Bennett's blind side.
He had one tackle for a loss on a pass play where he kind of sniffed out the play ahead of time.
And
that was it.
And he got pancaked a whole bunch.
He did. Like I said, Jamari Salyer took it personally. And I have to give Matt Luke a lot of credit for his game plan against that front of Michigan, making sure that Stetson Bennett had the time to get done what he needed to get done. And if it just so happened that you mauled an Outland Trophy winner, then that's what it took. I mean, they honestly took it personally, and it was a fantastic work by the offensive line to keep Stetson Bennett clean.
Well, you bring up the Georgia defenders. You got to go back to the Alabama and Cincinnati game. Will Anderson, I mean, how much can you say about how important he is
in the Southern Crescent?
I mean, how important he is to that defense. I mean, he just changes a game plan single-handedly. I don't know. They don't make him like him anymore.
My favorite clip that a lot of friends have sent me lately from that game was the wide receiver of I can't remember which receiver it was from Georgia, just absolutely planning a quarterback on his rear end.
Yeah, Georgia Pickens. Yeah.
That's been on a loop on my Twitter feed like all day long.
It was
sideline before the snap, and then he just punches him, takes both hands, punches him down, and he shushed him again. That was
He'll be playing basketball next year.
Yes, that was like the Dikembe Mutombo, right? That
No.
and look at a receiver like Pickens, who was out for most of the early part of the year, gradually integrated back into the lineup for Georgia, and this time of year gives them yet another weapon for Stetson Bennett.
And I didn't trust Jim Harbaugh not to do something stupid, and I was correct. I mean, you don't trust the Fighting Harbaughs when the game's on the line. You don't. They do well during the little games. When big games happen, Harbaugh doesn't win them.
I don't think he would have. There was much he could have done about it. Georgia just flat out manhandled him on both sides of the line. Nakobe Dean was amazing on defense, just running down people. I don't know if you saw the one play on a screen pass where they showed the wide shot. He ran across the field, tracked down the receiver, and tackled him for a loss.
Yeah. It was personal. For Georgia, I agree with John in his early assessment. It was personal. Absolutely. It felt that way.
Yeah, there's a lot of Michigan smack talk before that game. I don't know if you saw the picture of the lineman wearing the shirts that said "Run the damn ball."
Yep.
Yeah, the
one guy remarkably looked like the son from King of the Hill. That was Bobby.
Apparently, Georgia players did, because after the game, Jordan Davis, the Georgia nose tackle, was asked about it, and the answer he gave was, "Well, they were a really good offensive line. They earned their reputation," and smiled.
And if you think about it, you look at when you think Georgia, you think their defensive line. You think their defensive unit is stout. I agree with John's assessment of what Matt Luke did. I mean, that offensive line literally knew that if Stetson Bennett gets pressured, there's no telling what's going to happen with that ball. But you give him a clean pocket, let him look through his progressions, he is going to be a possession level type of a quarterback and will put the ball in places for his receivers to get it with accuracy and consistency. It's when he gets pressured and he's out of the pocket and he's scrambling, that's when his game falls to shit. But, I mean, I think that game plan for Georgia was just top-notch for both levels, and they're going to have to bring that A game again on January 10th to even have a chance in Hades to go up against this Alabama team right now, because this Alabama team is one of the best built from top to bottom teams that Saban's had in a while. So,
I would argue it's not in the top 5 of the best Nick Saban teams, but it's still better than most other teams that are out there, except for maybe Georgia.
I love B-Rob, though. I mean, you got to like what B-Rob's done in the backfield.
John, you were talking about Stetson Bennett during the game, and the one thing that really jumped off the page to me in his performance is the Achilles heel for him has always been forcing plays and trying to overperform or think too much and be too aggressive, and he didn't do that against Michigan. He let the game come to him, and made plays that were necessary. That long touchdown pass that he threw to Burton just absolutely fascinated me because the Michigan defensive back more or less had it covered up until the point where he just stopped.
Yeah.
And Burton kept running, and the ball just was like right there in his hands.
Yeah. And I don't know if the defensive back saw something or if, thought the play was over, was heading in a different direction or what. But once again, you have the vision and the presence of Stetson Bennett in this particular environment. And, for me, I looked at Michigan and they were in trouble. And, Marty, I don't know when you thought the game was over, but I think after the first couple of punches that Georgia landed, much like we saw in Alabama, Cincinnati, this one was pretty much done.
It was done early. I was, aside from yelling Schadenfreude like every 2.5 to 3 minutes, and my wife just sitting next to me laughing, they talked all this trash after they beat Ohio State pretty soundly, and I think they spent more time on talking than on prep.
Yep.
Like Georgia, was it Georgia or was it Alabama that blew off all the bowl extra stuff and said we're just watching film? I'm trying to remember where I heard that from. I don't know if it was a Twitter quote. You could just tell the focus.
Well, they were very limited. We talked last week, most bowl game activities were either postponed or no longer mandatory. So a lot of people didn't go to those. I don't recall hearing about either team just completely abandoning them, but I don't remember them going either.
Yeah, I don't think either SEC team went.
Well, and Kirby Smart basically warned his team not to give him the Gatorade shower.
Yep.
Oh, warn his team? How about he threatened his team?
Yep. Like, don't you do it.
Don't you do it.
Didn't you see what happened to that guy with the mayonnaise getting a semi-concussed? When they hit him with the
We'll
bucket.
talk about that in a minute here. As we kind of move on in the show, we've talked at quite a length here about the semifinal games. But guys, there were some other bowl games, and we'll talk in the second half about the matchup between Alabama and Georgia. But I want to get on to some of the other bowl games, and if you want to talk about the Mayonnaise Bowl first, we can.
Yeah, since we already talked about the mayonnaise concussion, and Marty brought it in. Let's go ahead.
We knew that both coaches, Shane Beamer and Mac Brown of the University of North Carolina, agreed that one of them would be willing to take the Duke's mayonnaise bath after the game, and it was Beamer who got crowned or coronated or whatever you want to call it.
Both.
Drowned.
Drowned, yeah.
It didn't go well. But he did get the win. South Carolina did beat one of their arch rivals, the North Carolina Tar Heels, in that game. What did you guys think when you saw that, besides laughing your asses off?
Wear a helmet next year.
Yes.
Yep.
Because didn't Shane Beamer say that he was going to be showering mayonnaise out of his own person for like the next week? Same with the clothing that he had. I would have just thrown the clothing away. And
that would have stayed there.
Gotten another round of stuff. But and they watered the mayonnaise down to get it to the Constitution.
Well, it was like mayonnaise, water, Gatorade. It was nasty.
Well, mayonnaise isn't exactly like Gatorade and something that just flows easily out of the jar.
No, it would have really given you a concussion if you had just done it in its au naturel. But you watered it down, and it still looked like you were pouring some over-the-top plate on somebody.
See what I would have done? I would have had all the players around with like the squeeze bottles of mayonnaise and squirting it that way instead of it in the bag.
I think you just saved that bowl. I mean that kind of had that feeling of the WKRP turkey drop, where you're like, oh.
Can I get name, image, and likeness credit for that for next year's bowl? Can I have my picture on the squeeze bottles?
Nice but Beamer and the Gamecocks, though. I mean, 30-21 over a North Carolina team that was ranked in the top 10 preseason this year.
Well, the one thing that stuck out of my head in this bowl game is, again, Sam Howell. Sam Howell, who has already said, peace out, Chapel Hill, I'm going to the NFL draft. I mean, he's just like a 3-year starter version of Mitch Trubisky. I mean, he's got some good stats. He's done some good things, but he's just not that good a quarterback when games are on the line, because we all have seen South Carolina all year long. They're 7-6 ball club right now. You know, they play decent ball, but when you're only completing 12 out of 20 passes for 2 Bills against the South Carolina defense, who had some questionable starters in the secondary, you got to do better than that. And he only had 3 yards rushing. Yeah, jeez. South Carolina stymied Howell. And again, this is a game that really didn't mean a whole lot, but I just think, again, he's just an overrated version of Mitch Trubisky.
Good on Shane Beamer, though. He did a great job coaching the Gamecocks to a 7-6 record this year, basically without a quarterback.
Yep.
They played multiple people at quarterback this season, including a graduate assistant.
Zeb Noland.
Yeah.
Zeb Noland of Coney County High School.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that should get you serious Coach of the Year consideration.
Yeah, at least, yeah. But yeah, I mean, yeah, they're like in Columbia, they're like, Will Muschamp who?
I don't want to go through all the bowl games. There's like 20 of them, but I want to hit on a couple that jumped off the page to me. And one of them, including one of them that, John, you got to attend in person this past week. And that would be the Ticket Smarter Birmingham Bowl, where Auburn went down to Houston.
Well,
17-13 win for the Cougars. What did you think?
That should not have been a surprise. I mean, come on now. I mean, you had
a mighty SEC team losing to a group of 5 school?
Well, mighty?
Well, a slightly above average.
Let's get off the SEC blowhardness. They got 2 good teams and
everybody else.
Yeah, like
6-6 Auburn was not a mighty team.
Okay, so a very slightly above average Auburn team.
I wouldn't even call it that, considering TJ Finley was at quarterback, and TJ Finley has proven at his second school in the Southeastern Conference that he is not a Southeastern Conference quality quarterback. I still have questions when it comes to Brian Harsin and his play calling, considering late in the game, with the game on the line, on a 4th down and short, Hank Casey, your number 1 running back, was on the sidelines. I have no earthly idea where a lot of the play calling came from. I mean, other than, in between Brian Harsin's ears, I get that. But just there were a lot of things that were predicated on the success of TJ Finley. TJ Finley has issues with the clock in his head when it comes to releasing the ball. His timing with his receiver is non-existent, especially on out routes that have to go to the marker. He's throwing way ahead of the time that is needed to complete these passes, and there isn't any depth at running back. So a lot of things were predicated on the success of Tank Bigsby in the offensive line. Brian Harsin, for some reason, went away from that and tried to give TJ Finley situations where he was trying to get him to complete passes and succeed. It was not the proper decision to make. So Dana Holgerson and Houston, as a group of 5 school, I honestly had them winning this game just because of Auburn going into this game having leads in 4 straight games and losing them, in addition to all the frustrations that you see on offense. Defense is fine. Defense under Derek Mason, to me, has been fine. It has been the offense and the decisions around it that have been the issues. So for me, I still have questions with Brian Harsin. I still have questions of TJ Finley, and I still have questions as to why Tank Bigsby didn't change his mind back and get back in the portal, considering everything that we've seen.
Good season for the Cougars, though. 12 wins from Holgerson's team this year was really impressive.
Absolutely. And that to me is the larger element in all of this, is that you got to see a group of 5 school in Houston do what they needed to do against a stout defense and get it done when you needed to. So there are, and also, we can get into Pac-12 and targeting and the targeting rule in college football in general, where 2 targeting calls were put up against the defensive backs of Auburn, and you had 2 ejections on 2 calls. When you look on the big board, they weren't targeting, but that's just another thing.
Well, the Smoke Monday call they didn't end up making, but he's also somebody who's
been
targeting
targeting
more than
the NIL.
Yeah. So I think that this win was a better win for Houston than it was a representation of holding on to another lead for the 5th game in a row that got blown for Auburn, finished up 6-7.
Guys, did you get to see the interim coach bowl featuring Oklahoma and Oregon playing down in San Antonio at the Alamo Bowl? Big win for Brett Venables and the Oklahoma Sooners, 47-32.
Is that a win for Brett Venables, or is that a win for Bob Stoops?
That's a win for Bob.
Bob Stoops, yeah. But,
No, he took nothing for that either, right?
Oh, he did.
One of the coolest moments of that game, me personally, is on the stadium on the stage afterwards. They're talking about Bob Stoops. What does this victory mean for Oklahoma? As humble as ever. I mean, I really, really like Bob Stoops. But then he literally says, "No, the visor's yours," and put the visor on Brent Venables' head. I thought that kind of a passing of the guard. I thought that was a cool moment on stage. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see next year.
That was just, Stoops is from my hometown, so I pull for the guy. But,
yep.
Yeah, I mean, good man. He's pretty much got a lifetime whatever he wants to do for Oklahoma. I think
and that's no easy feat, giving all that turmoil and like how much players could have totally checked out on that game, and to bring it like that.
Yep. And then Mark Stoops won as well at Kentucky, so good season for the Stoops family.
It's a good week to be from Ohio.
Yes.
A good one for the Wildcats, 2017 over Iowa in the Citrus Bowl. 10-win season for Mark Stoops. Not something that Kentucky's used to doing.
No, but and then you had Purdue and Tennessee, who basically just YOLO for a full 60 minutes.
That was a touchdown. Forward momentum, my ass. That was a touchdown. Anyway. Thanks for bringing that up, John.
Purdue just does weird things.
Yes, they do. I mean, Aiden O'Connell, 26-47, 534, 5-3 on the day. Then Hendon Hooker, 26-40, 378, 5. I mean, it was insane, the numbers in this one. And you had a 29-point fourth quarter.
Yep.
A 29-point fourth quarter in a game that never ended. And just, I mean, that's the biggest question for me is, like, I think that in this bowl season, this really ranks up there for me as bowl of the bowl season.
Yeah, and Tennessee lost in the most epically Tennessee way possible. They crap the bed like they always have this. They do well, and then like fourth quarter, I'm going, somebody stop somebody, and nope. But
they still had, after all that, they still had a chance to win when the game went to overtime, and they still couldn't win.
But it was a touchdown.
It doesn't matter.
Purdue,
he was laying on the dude. Anyway.
Even after that, they still had a chance to win, and they couldn't.
They did.
That's why it makes me crazy when fans complain about plays that happen midway through a period or before a game ends. But if you have a play that's taken away from you midway through a game, and it just means the game's tied, you still have an opportunity to win.
Okay, I have to get on another soapbox here, so please forgive me. It's the same game, but Tennessee plays an up-tempo offense. They go. Same with Wake Forest. And you get these phantom defensive injuries towards the end of the game. And there's like 25 injuries in the fourth quarter, and enough for the side judge to come up to Josh Heupel and say, "Yeah, we need a rule to fix that." So yeah, that's comical. That we want to slow down.
Where was that officiating crew from, by the way?
It's ACC school, ACC officiating crew. They're like, yeah, coach, we need a rule change to fix that. That's just crazy. And Heupel's like, that's stupid that they would come to me. That's almost comical. But yeah, it's stupid because that's a classic. Freaking Lane Kiffin did it with Ole Miss during the golf ball bowl.
Yeah.
In Tennessee.
I thought after that happened a couple of years ago, there was a rule in place.
Nope, there's nothing officially on the books to stop or prevent that currently right now. Nothing enforceable anyway by officiating crews.
Okay.
Needs to be. Mark Emmert, if you're listening, get off your butt and do something useful.
That'll probably happen around 2038 if you're asking. Sir.
Yeah. Sorry, off my soapbox now. Sorry.
And lastly, for bowl games, I want to talk about a game that Marty had somewhat of an interest in, the Ohio State-Utah shootout from last night in the Rose Bowl.
You can continue bad officiating. That SEC,
it was an
the
SEC
kick return for a touchdown. 2 players get injured from being blocked in the back. 1 kid broke his leg.
Yep.
No flags.
No flags.
It was ridiculous. I mean,
They
also had a drive where there was like they drove 50 yards to score, but they only actually got non-penalty yardage of like 5 or 10. It was ridiculous. There was like 2 deep PI, and everybody's looking around like, at who?
Yeah, and you want to talk about points in a quarter. That game, 42 points in the second quarter.
Yep.
Yeah.
Same.
You got to like our backups at receiver. If I'm a 5-star wide receiver, I'm like, yeah, just send me there. I'll sit for a little bit. I mean, our 4th best guy was leading Alabama.
Well, the receiver room at Ohio State's good enough that Jamison Williams, who's one of the leading receivers for Alabama, had to transfer out of Ohio State just to get some playing time.
And that was nothing against him. That Hartline, like, I don't know how somebody hasn't tried to steal him as a head coach yet, because he's a ridiculous recruiter. But I mean, I got to give hats off to like the defense. I don't know if you know about Demario McCall has been at Ohio State for like 6 years, and that defense was terrible in the first half. And he's had a lot of issues, and this is kind of it's appropriate to talk about this right now because you see a lot of people just acting the fool and transferring. He was a wide receiver. He was a running back. He had a bit of a problem with, doing stupid things. Like he recorded a coach's speech and put it up. He live streamed it. This year he switched from wide receiver, kick returner, running back to defensive back and stayed with the team. He didn't transfer. He could have went somewhere else and started. His speed is like next level, but he was the person that got up at halftime and ripped into the other players talking about playing with passion. And there was 5 different players that came out after the game saying he's the reason that they stepped it up a notch and started getting stops.
Hats off to him for that one. Respect. If you may not be on the right path early, but getting on the right path at some point is always a good thing.
Great guy.
Guys, we blew through some bowl games here. Before we end the first half of the show, Brother Wilkie has his Wilkie's World segment, and he's not talking bowl games. He's talking about the FCS. Brother Wilkie, take it away, my friend.
Roll that beautiful bean footage.
Thanks, guys. So it's Georgia and Alabama in the national championship game in Indianapolis next Monday. And what we get is SEC Nirvana 2. The first time around here in Atlanta 4 years ago, right in the SEC's backyard, it was fantastic. How's it going to play in the Big Ten's backyard in Indianapolis? That's going to be fun to watch, as 2 of the most passionate fan bases in college football converge in Indianapolis. I think it's going to be a good time for the folks in Indy to watch those fan bases interact. Okay, let's look at the 2 semifinal games because, again, it clearly showed SEC dominance in major college football. And the reason why is both have outstanding lines, offensive and defensive lines that came to play. And the other 2 schools, Cincinnati and Michigan, just didn't have the horses to match. Let's start with Alabama and Cincinnati. Alabama was dominant from the get-go. When they drove down the field to score against Cincinnati on their first possession, you knew right then and there that this was going to be a long day for the Bearcats. In fact, I thought it probably would have been wise for the Bearcats to, when they won the toss, to take the ball and perhaps maybe put 3 points on the board at least to draw first blood. They were playing behind from the get-go, and Alabama dominated. What that also means for a group of 6 schools is I don't think they're ever going to be able to make the college football playoff for the foreseeable future. I mean, I mentioned last week the Cincinnati Bearcats are like the 1968 New York Jets. They had to win this game to legitimize the Mountain West, the Americans, the MACs, those conferences, the Sun Belts. legitimacy in to get into the college football playoff. Now, I think the committee has a body of work to show that those group of 5 schools just don't have what it takes to play with the big boys, and that's a shame. It probably cools down expansion for a while to include those schools. It's impossible to have a Cinderella in college football. It's just too many big players that are agile in the SEC level and in other conferences throughout major college football. But Alabama dominated, and I think it's going to be very hard for a group of 5 team. In fact, I think it's impossible for them now to be included in the college football playoff. I don't think the committee wants to allow that to happen again. Again, with Georgia and Michigan, again, SEC dominance by the Georgia Bulldogs. The lines were outstanding for Georgia, and to me, that's the difference between the SEC schools and everybody else. They have those guys on the interior line are big, they're fast, they're agile, and nobody else can seem to match that when they play in a championship level. So Georgia and Alabama will play in Indianapolis, and I think it's going to be a fun game to watch. I think it's going to be very similar to what we saw 4 years ago in Atlanta for the national title game. Wouldn't be shocked if we win overtime. Wouldn't be shocked if Alabama won it. In fact, I think Alabama will win this game and make it a record 8th national title for Nick Saban, his 7th at Alabama. And I think, I think it's going to be very similar. And I wouldn't be surprised if Georgia won. I got to go with Alabama in this game simply because I think, you've got the 2 best teams in the country going at each other. But, I just feel more comfortable picking Alabama. And let's not forget that another national championship football game will be played on Saturday. This for the FCS. And guess what? We got a couple of powerhouses playing in that one too. North Dakota State's going for their 8th national championship. And they are the Alabama of FCS. They play in the best league, the Missouri Valley Football Conference. And they take on Montana State that comes from probably the other best league in the FCS, and that's the Big Sky Conference. In fact, they're very partial to both leagues. Look, both teams at that level have the best tacklers, the best blockers, and the best as far as skill position players in the FCS. And I think this is going to be a fun game to watch. It's going to be close. If you like good, pure football, good blocking, good tackling, this is really a game to watch for you out there. But if I got to pick this one, I got to go with the Bison. They've been there and done that before. Montana State, very talented team. But North Dakota State just has some really bigger players, always fundamentally sound on defense. I rarely see a Bison defender miss a tackle. So I got to go with the Bison in this one. And that's all I got, fellas.
As always, we appreciate you, my brother. Wish you could be here with us when we recorded the show, but glad to have you via the magic of editing. With that all being said, guys, why don't we go ahead and throw it to break here. When we come back in the second half of the show, we're going to preview the national championship game. We're going to talk about some interesting comments made by a couple of ESPN's leading analysts. And that the fallout from it after a Ole Miss quarterback, Matt Corral, got hurt during his game. All that and more when we come back with the second half of the show. You are listening to The Review on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinski of Apolinski & Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
I think this era of player just doesn't love football.
That's what I was about to say.
Thanks for sticking around, everybody. You have made it to the second half of the show. This is the Online Sports Guys College Football Podcast, the review featuring us, the Online Sports Guys. And before we get into the content, got to do the promotional part here. You can find us on social media. Look us up at OSG Sports on both Facebook and Twitter. If you found us on YouTube, then you know where to look. Same thing at OSG Sports. Underneath our names and pictures, you will see our Twitter handles. Make sure to hit us up if you got anything that you want to say. And of course, it's the phone app. And that phone app, guys, is what? How much does it cost?
Free.
It's free. Download it today. Go to the Google Play Store or the Apple Store. Look up OSG Sports. We will come up. Download the app today because we would be really grateful if you did.
Yeah. So cheap, a student athlete could afford it.
But donations are welcome.
Yes, they are. Speaking of donations, guys, coming back in the second half of the show, want to address something that's drawn a lot of controversy here over the first 2 days of the new year. And that's something that ESPN's Kirk Herbstreit and Desmond Howard kind of argued about during the College Game Day show at the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day, when both of them kind of went off on tangents about the current crop of college football players opting out of playing in bowl games. The reason it became relevant is because Ole Miss quarterback Matt Corral, a little later in the day, who is a likely, maybe not a first round, but a second or third round draft pick, but definitely one of the top quarterbacks in the draft class, got hurt during their bowl game and had to be carted off the field, returned a little later on crutches. But what were your thoughts about what Herbstreit and Desmond Howard said? I'll try and cue them up here before we start talking about it. Is this a get off my lawn moment from those guys? It sounds so old school for them to criticize players for not playing in a bowl game and putting their draft futures at risk.
You can't risk generational money. And Howard's a clown. Yeah. I mean, he's classless, like he proved at the Heisman ceremony. Him just running his mouth is just ridiculous. I expect better from.
So while Herbie does the same thing.
Yeah, I expected better from him, to be honest, because he's usually more even keeled than most people. But I mean, you look at like Ohio State, Olave opted out early. He still went to practice. He still helped the younger receivers. He's got to be smart about what he's doing, and that's generational money. That's life-changing generational money.
Oh hell yeah!
And I have vacillated on this topic back and forth because someone like me, yes, scholarship athlete at a sub-tier ACC school, I understand that when I went to the bowl game, my butt was playing. Because I'm not a generational talent. I'm not someone like a Matt Corral who's going to get millions and millions and millions of signing bonuses in the fifth-year option. So I would have played. So I've kind of vacillated. I've been saying if you get in a bowl game, you have to play to help your team, right? But then you look at someone like a Kenny Pickett with Pittsburgh. He opted out of playing, but he was at practice all week. Like Marty said, helping a team. Didn't play, but he was there, present. Matt Corral, no one on this podcast or even a sports fan will question his heart, will question that dude's moxie, who's willing to drop his shoulder and run over somebody. I mean, but then he gets hurt. So then you have to ask yourself, if it's a permanent damage to the ankle, does that affect his draft class? I had him as my number 2 quarterback off the board. I had him behind Kenny Pickett. If his ankle is serious, that could drop him below like a Malik Willis or Sam Howell and could mess up his generational money. So that one choice to do that affects that. So I'm of the opinion now, college athletes don't owe me a thing. They want to pull out, they pull out. They protect themselves, do what's best for them, especially if it's a non sequitur, non-important, useless throwaway bowl game like the freaking mayonnaise bowl. If you don't want to play, don't play. Now, if it's a national championship game, you're gonna buckle up and go.
Totally different issue.
But a little itty bitty bowl game, dude, protect yourself, do what's best for you and your family, and go ahead.
Yeah.
You don't owe me an explanation at all. And I have changed. Beginning of the year, I was completely different. Now, save your money, brother.
Yeah, you look at the 4-letter network. Last time I saw, they were charging for all those ads, right?
Yep.
What, 38 million in ad revenue alone on the playoff games, the 2. Another, I think I read like 19 million in ad revenue for all the nobody cares about it bowls.
Yep.
Seriously, like
Yeah.
I couldn't even count how many different variations of people tweeting. If they have love of the game, how about they go ad free for the rest of the playoffs? And how many times did you guys see that when you're looking at at Twitter or any social media?
Yeah, John, the world's changed since these guys played.
Yep.
I mean, even J-Dub, Herbie, Desmond Howard, it's a different game in a different world. Back in the 1980s and the 1990s, bowl games were a big deal for individual teams to go play in. They're no longer like that, in part because ESPN diluted the water so much, and you get a bowl game, and you get a bowl game, and you get a bowl game.
You didn't get one? Hey, we'll make one up.
Well, it's even like with the Independent, and I'll let you go, John. Let me finish this point. I mean, the Independence Bowl we went to in 1992, that mattered to us. It mattered. It was Bill Dooley's last college game. We played up against Oregon. We beat Ronnie Harris and the Ducks. That game meant something. Maybe not necessarily grand scheme of things. It wasn't a CFP back then, but it meant something to our university because we got money, we got prestige, we got other things from that. 1992 was different than 2021. It's different, and the life has changed. The money has changed. The situation has changed. If I'm in the Jimmy Fallon Bowl and I'm going to be a number 1 draft pick, I'm not playing. I'm just saying. So what was you saying, John?
Oh, no, I look at it this way. First and foremost, if you look at it from the network perspective, bowl games today in this era are television programs. They are not, as we know, bowl games.
No.
They are television programs. They are 3.5-hour blocks of television programming put together by an entity referred to by their own selves as ESPN events.
Yep.
Yeah.
And when you look,
And they televise all but 3 of the bowl games scheduled every year.
Yep.
And what you have 40 programs that you have to fill. And one of the things that I think a lot of folks may not understand, and honestly, if you take it a couple of different ways, from the 4-letter themselves, you had on College Game Day, you had Kirk Herbstreit and Desmond Howard going after their common opinion, and Herbstreit later would apologize for it. Then you had Greg McElroy taking the player's point of view. Then you had Joe Tessitore taking the opposite point of view in the same broadcast booth in the Sugar Bowl. And I think the biggest thing to look at here is that there is a generational disconnect between the bowl games that we know of growing up watching everything on New Year's Day, and you get the sequence of everything, and it ends with the Sugar Bowl after the Rose Bowl, and looking at the Citrus and looking at the Hall of Fame or the Outback, what have you. New Year's Day used to be that linear element where you'd start at 11 a.m., you'd end after midnight, basically. Right now, if you are a student athlete, which is more leaning toward athlete student, and you have the opportunity to look out for yourself with generation money that was not there when we were watching bowl games and when we were brought up in college, I see no fault from these college football players to look out for themselves. Do not mix the notion of they don't care about their teammates with them looking out for their futures. I think that they are mutually exclusive in that particular. So for me, if an athlete like a Matt Corral wants to play, that is his prerogative. And unfortunately, you saw what happened, and hopefully it's not anything that is going to be career altering with surgeries and what have you. But I honestly, if an athlete sees themselves as a first round pick and they continue to participate, I get it. That's a part of your DNA. If you don't participate and you're looking out for your possible pro career, I get it. It's a part of your DNA. So I'm not going to sit here and shame a current college football player for wanting to make the decision to lay out of a bowl game because they're looking out for their own future. I mean, if a mechanical engineer or an aerospace scientist gets a job from NASA or McDonnell Douglas or Grumman when they're 20 years old and they are still in college chasing that degree, and they have that offer to get that six-figure job at the age of 20, why shouldn't they take that jump and chase after that job, even though the degree you can still chase after it at the same time? I would apply these same principles to normal occupations outside of athletics and ask yourself the same question. If someone who's 20 or 21 is given the opportunity to chase after that six-figure job, seven-figure job, what have you, what is to keep them from being away from their graduating class? No, I think I'm going to stick with my graduating class and graduate as a 22-year-old senior because that's what I want to do. No, if NASA comes to me as a junior or a sophomore, sees my promise, offers me a six-figure gig, am I going to turn NASA down for a six-figure gig at the age of 20? The answer to that should be no.
Well, the 90% of the hate I've seen online about people pulling out are fans of teams. I want to win this game. Why are you not playing? The people who are giving the players crap are people who have never ever strapped it up or played or had an understanding of the ability. It's craziness, where that's coming from. And I agree with you, John. Why would you throw that away?
You did not see any teammates complaining about it.
No.
I remember seeing an interview with CJ Stroud. He had 2 first-round wide receivers opt out of the game, and that directly affects his performance. He supported him 100%.
Yep.
Well,
As it should be.
I'll take this one step further. In the group text chat that we have during the week, JW, you sent us something about North Carolina State head coach Dave Doeren complaining loudly about UCLA forfeiting their game at the last minute and wanting UCLA to pay them back.
Yep.
Nobody else really was complaining about it. It was just one of those things because of the COVID issue they couldn't play the game. And the part that Doeren left out his conversation was, had they played that game, and NC State did not get credit for the win, by the way.
Nope. They got the trophy, but not credit for the win.
Had NC State played and won the game, Dave Doeren was due an extra $50,000.
Yep.
Nobody else on the team was. He was.
Yeah, being up here in OSG Carolina's office, they've been playing those sound bites from him on repeat for the last week, and it's a bad look for him in the university. It's a bad look for people close to Boo Corrigan, the AD at NC State, talking about trying to get UCLA to pay their money for travel, even though the bowl committee, they're the ones that handle a lot of that payment back. It's just been an interesting sequence of events for Doeren, and he came out. He looked like the one interview that the WRAL, the 500-pound gorilla in town, had less than an hour after UCLA backed out, was really he was hot and he was salty. It was like they don't know what the hell they're doing. And like, while we all agree with Doeren and the NCAA has no clue what they're doing, NCAA had no control over that decision. That was a decision that was made for the UCLA AD, best for their programs, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, Dave Doeren came out looking really, really bad in this whole situation.
It goes to the bigger point of what we were just saying there. The coaches get paid bonuses for those games.
Yep.
The players don't see any. They get a swag bag.
Yep.
That's it. So why would the players put themselves out there if they've got nothing at stake in playing in the game?
Yeah, that was a joke when in the Weed Eater Bowl we were like, "Are we going to all get weed eaters?" And then we're like, "Okay, what is a college student, 20-year-old college student, going to do with a weed eater?" So we got lots of like Poulon, shirts in a bag and things. So that was our swag bag. No, like, extra feeder cord for our weed eaters. That was really funny. But yeah, why, we saw zero financial kickback from that in our own pockets. Of course, that was a different time before NIL. But yeah, I agree with you, Phil. I mean, it's just craziness. This whole bowl season is crazy. Going to a different point. When I played, there were 18 bowl games, John. Like on that New Year's Day, there were 18 bowl games played in 1992-93.
Mm-hmm.
There were 41 scheduled games this year alone.
43 scheduled.
And out of those, two of them actually had an impact on what was going to happen in the postseason or a championship.
Yep. So you
I
don't
won't
think the
say playoff
Gasparilla Bowl
expansion
was
because that's a whole nother podcast.
But yeah,
Yes, it is.
no, you ain't kidding, brother.
But the thing about it is, though, you got to look at this from a teammate's perspective. Like you said, C.J. Stroud did not complain. This is a next man up type of a situation. You look at Ole Miss. Matt Corral gets hurt. I hope he's healthy. I hope there's nothing long term, nothing against him at all. But you get somebody like a Luke Altmaier, who is the future in Ole Miss. Now you're looking at these people, like even the backup in Pittsburgh. No one knows his name because Kenny Pickett's been there all year. The people who opt out, then you have the second, third, fourth string teammates get to come out and say, okay, I'm in the Sugar Bowl and I get to actually play ball. So this is, again, it's good for the university at the same time as it's bad because think about it. Kenny Pickett's graduating, right? What will Altmaier do when he's put on the line? So if you look at it from a developing your program standpoint, if you're in a bowl game and you have opt-outs, you put in your second, your third, your fourth guy to see what they can do with the game on the line. And that ultimately is a win-win for the university. You save your generational money and you see what's coming in your pipeline.
And that leads me to this, and I'll ask the three of you guys this and let you go on your rants about it. Does that make all the bowl games, with the exception of the college football playoff game, does that make them basically glorified exhibition games?
TV programs. That's it.
Yep. JV programs.
Yeah.
I'll agree. It's an exhibition game. It's an endowment game. It's just something to put programming in prime time with some football, and Americans love their pastime. So the four letters looking for people to watch their shows.
Yeah, I mean, you could have had some of these matchups on during the regular season and nobody would have watched them. But I mean, I found myself watching teams I don't care about just because it's a bowl game.
Yep. Like, no offense to John, I would not watch Auburn-Houston during the regular season.
Oh, no.
There's no reason to.
Regular season, I wouldn't. I mean, if I had no vested interest, I wouldn't watch that, in the regular season. If it was this late in the regular season, I wouldn't necessarily watch it as a non-region game if I didn't have a vested interest.
Right.
But as a bowl game, and if my memory is correct, leading into all the bowl games through the first half of the bowl season, capital B, capital S trademark, through bowl season, I think only one game of the first half of bowl season, capital B, capital S trademark, had less than 1 million viewers. So this has proven to ESPN and ESPN events that these 40 television programs that they have, with all the ancillary programming and all the sponsors that can be attached to it, that it gives them ratings as programs that they're looking for to fill space on all of their platforms. It is a strategy that works as a television program because this is what we're drawn to. We like bowl season because it's stuff that's on the air.
Yep.
And I mean, during the regular season, watching.
There's other things to do.
Yeah, during the regular season, there's other stuff to do, and there's other things to occupy our time. In this void from December 15th to January 15th, there isn't a whole lot going on. So when Central Michigan turns into one of the funniest subplots, we're going to follow along Central Michigan and follow every step of the way And folks are going to sit there and thumb their nose at the sponsor of the Arizona Bowl because they didn't get their bowl game as one of the 3 that wasn't a part of ESPN events. But Central Michigan, we know that it was a 4-hour drive for all of their trucks and their 18-wheelers and their bands and everything else that was going from Tucson, Arizona to El Paso, Texas, so they could be in a bowl game, even though that bowl game wasn't on ESPN either. But because we're in that 1-month window of bowl season, capital B, capital S trademark, we're going to be interested in what we see from Central Michigan, and they opened up the entire case of whoop-ass on Washington State. So it was a fun subplot to follow during bowl season, which are television programs now.
The Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl, it just makes me laugh. But one of the things I saw on Twitter, and this goes to your point, John, a local beat writer out west, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, said bowl games are money makers, not difference makers. It exists only to make money and doesn't really truly affect anyone's life. Nothing's on the line. There may be some street cred. You want to say you won the Gasparilla Bowl, but
college football staggers its entire postseason around them and will not make any changes because those games exist. What is that?
And some of the players, it helps launch them.
Yep, that's what I'm saying. The second, third, and fourth strings, or some of the ones who finally get some airtime, like Central Michigan. They're not in prime time a lot. So if they were on TV, that would have been great, for that. But I mean, you look at, some of these programs like Georgia State, right? And, some of these other ones, I'm looking at some of these. And funny standpoint, Clemson is the only team this year to hold all of their games to 27 points or less. So that was an interesting stat I saw.
My favorite stat was Jackson Smith and Njigba having more yards by himself than the entirety of Michigan.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. Yep.
Had to get that last shot in. Guys, before we wrap up the show here, we'll go round robin style. Everybody takes their turn. Who you got in the national championship game, Georgia against Alabama, part duh, and why do you have them?
Who starts?
You start.
Okay, I'll start. Well, Georgia opens up as a 2-point favorite over Alabama, which I think is hilarious.
Yeah.
But I've got Alabama by 10 points. I got Alabama 24. I got Alabama 24, Georgia 14.
Why?
I just think that I don't have faith in Kirby Smart in the big games. I think Kirby Smart sees Nick Saban across away from him, and he loses his mind, does not make the appropriate halftime adjustments. Saban is the master at beating his disciples, and I think that Georgia Georgia scores first. I think Zeus gets the first touchdown on the ground in the first quarter, but then Alabama makes the halftime adjustments and ends up winning 24-14.
Marty?
I'm going 34-10. I don't know why. It just popped into my head. Oh, of course, Alabama. Georgia just, just like Harbaugh, it's a big game. He's looking across at Saban. He's going to crap his pants.
Yep.
He's going to wear one pair of khakis up until halftime, like Joe Paterno at the Ohio State game, and come out with a different color pair of khakis after halftime. He's going to seizure, and, it's already played out once this year. I hate having to watch it twice, but
agreed.
There's no more bowls on.
That's what's best for business. I'll go 27-21 Alabama. The way that I always look at it is Nick Saban teaches his assistants everything they know. He doesn't teach them everything he knows.
Yep.
27-21. I think that the same weaknesses are there for the University of Georgia. I think that Bryce Young has a passing day north of 300 yards, and I think that Georgia's secondary is on its heels. I think that Georgia's running game will get some early successes, but I think third quarter will be the decider for Alabama, and they'll get some distance, and they'll end up winning by 6.
I agree with J-Dub here that the deciding factor in this game is going to be, believe it or not a player, but Kirby Smart, who has a tendency to overthink everything. Just look at what happened. The Bulldogs played a game in the SEC championship game that was unlike any other game they played the entire season. They changed what they did. They changed how they did it to try to play Alabama's game. And if you try to play Alabama's game, you're going to get beat. That being said, I'm going to go against the crowd and take the Bulldogs in this game, 37-31. Oof. And the reason I'm going to make that call is because of Georgia offensive coordinator Todd Monken.
Okay.
Alabama's defense has been vulnerable all season long, and that's with Will Anderson. Their secondary is leaky, much like Georgia's is. I think that Monken dials up some plays that haven't been in the playbook at this point in time, and it surprises Alabama. And if they get into a track meet, they've got a chance. Alabama without John Mechie at wide receiver is not the Alabama offense of a couple of weeks ago. I think that Georgia dials up a little bit different look on defense.
What into this?
And I think Dan Lanning goes out with a bang before he heads to Oregon with a win. I like Georgia in this game unless Kirby sticks his foot in his mouth one more time.
Which is a high probability.
I want to see how you came up with that. I'm like on the other side of your office. I'm seeing like one of those conspiracy boards with pieces of yarn going around. I like it though, and it makes total sense. I just want to know like which fans that barely graduated high school and didn't go to an SEC college are going to start chanting SEC first.
Oh, yeah, no kidding.
I saw a cartoon yesterday where they had Alabama's mascot with a large piece of wood on his shoulders carrying all the other teams in the SEC. And then all the fans that were riding it were chanting SEC. You know, it was all the teams in the middle were the ones that lost their bowl games.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember which announcer it was, the last bowl I was watching for the evening. They were talking about how the SEC was dominating in the playoffs. I'm like, they didn't win a game till today.
Yeah, they didn't. Literally, they were 0-5 going into New Year's Eve.
And all the losses were against Power Fives.
And wasn't the Big Ten had a better record than anybody else?
Mountain West won the bowl series.
Mountain West and the AC.
Yeah, they I think the Mountain West so far. I think they had won the trophy, the nebulous trophy that you get for having the best record in bowl season. Capital B, capital S trademark.
Yeah, guys, I think we got ourselves another podcast when it comes to talking about why why Alabama and to a lesser extent Georgia are the teams that we always seem to be having this conversation about their dominance.
Oh yeah.
And,
because there's so much space between them and everybody else.
Oh, and there's a multitude of reasons why. And it's not necessarily for the good of the game, but I think that's, like I said, a conversation maybe perhaps when we meet again to do our January version of the review. For those of you wondering why I said that, it's because as the season winds to a close and we have the clock struck midnight on January 1st, we've entered 2022 and we begin our monthly our podcast goes from being weekly to being monthly until we get close to the college football season again late in the summertime. So
it's never weak.
What's that?
It's never weak. Weekly cannot describe us.
No. W-E. Marty went with the alternate spelling.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes, he did. And because I was in the middle of my rambling on there, I kind of missed it.
He went with the Big 12 spelling of weekly.
Oh.
Wow.
So for the in-season weekly version of the review, we will sign off here. When we come back again in a couple of weeks, we'll hopefully talk a little bit about the national championship game and why it is what it is. That sounds like as good a topic as anything, unless something comes up in the meantime.
FCS championship?
Perhaps. Well, Wilkie hit on that here in Wilkie's world, so we don't really have to cover it.
Nope. Thank you, Wilkie. Thank you, other half of Stereo, J-Dub.
Yes.
For Brother Marty, for OSG Nelson, OSG J-Dub, Brother Wilkie, and myself, OSG Phil, we are the Online Sports Guys. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Have a fantastic week. We will talk to you again very, very soon.
Roll Tide.
Kiss my ass.